the summary, find a great business. Who doesn't want to fly cheap? So if anyone out there wants to start a low-cost airline in Russia, do it today. Because you've got 150 million people here. It's a fantastic country, but it's still expensive to fly. Low fares, everyone loves that. So whatever business you're going to start a business that people want. Make sure you surround yourself with great people, because it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about the team you have. And allow the team to be great. Make sure you market, because you can have a great company, but if no one knows about it, you're not going to go anywhere. And fourthly, use technology. And I think then the world's your oyster. You know, I've been a big dreamer. I was sent to England when I was 13 years old to go to boarding school. I'd never been to England in my life. My father came to me one day and said, "We're sending you to boarding school in England." I was like, okay, sounds interesting. I went on the plane. My father was a complete madman. He just gave me 50 pounds, put me on the plane, and said goodbye to me. And Malaysia had a very small airport back in the 70s. You could wave to everyone, and it was all very nice. And I had my unaccompanied miner's badge. I arrived in Heathrow Airport, and I was like, oh my God, it's so huge. And everyone was white. I'd never seen so many white people before in my life. I told my daughter, you have no such problem now, because when you arrive in Heathrow Airport now, everyone's Indian. So you'll feel quite at home. But when I went there, I was like, oh my God. And I arrived in my school, which looked like a prison camp. And I called my mother up and said, can I come home for half term? And she said, no, it's too expensive. And I was 13 years old at the time. And I said, one day I'm going to make it cheap to fly. And it was always in my brain about low fares. And so when I got the chance to start an airline, my first idea was a long-haul, low-cost airline to fly from Kuala Lumpur to London. And everyone told me that was a stupid idea, so I started a short-haul airline, which is AirAsia. But AirAsia X was always in my brain. And, you know, I was sitting with Richard Branson on his island. He threw me a party because I made him so much money in the record business. And all the old artists were there, and we were sitting on the beach later, and Richard said, how come two of us have never done a business together? And I said, well, generally because you steal from everyone else, and you never put your own money in. And then Boy George, you're all probably too young, but from a band called Culture Club, was walking past, and he was pretty stoned. And he said, hey, you two should do a business. And so I said to Richard, if Boy George says we should do a business, then let's do a business. So Richard said, what should we do? I said, look, I have this idea to start a long-haul, low-cost airline. And that was the birth of AirAsia X. And the two of us set up AirAsia X. And I never flew on AirAsia X. The first destination was to Australia. The second destination was China. And then there was a third destination to India. I wanted my first flight on AirAsia X to be from London, because I promised my mother 27 years ago that I would do this one day. And so when we finally decided to fly to London, I went to my old school in London, and I got the driver to pick me up from my boarding house in London, and we drove to the airport. Different airport, because I used to fly from Heathrow, and now we were flying from Stansted. And so it took me, from exactly the time, 30 years, from when I told my mother that we would make it cheap to fly from London to KL, to it actually happening. And it was very emotional for me when I got to the airport, and I saw 3 or 4 students who came up to me and said, oh, thank you for starting AirAsia, because we couldn't have gone home without AirAsia. So dreams really do come true. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do anything. Because I was selling music. I'm selling Madonna and Phil Collins and all these artists. And now we've allowed 60 million people a year to fly, which they never dreamt of flying. Only 6% of Malaysians flew before AirAsia came along. And now 92% of Malaysians have flown since we've come.